My name is Nathan, and I come from a broken family, raised under the thumb of a controlling mother and her intrusive sisters. Lillian, the eldest, was 13 years older than me, while Claire was 10 years my senior. I've often suspected I was an unplanned child, held responsible for the breakdown of my parents' marriage. My father walked out in 1977 when I was just 5 years old and never came back. Throughout my childhood, I endured bullying both at school and at home. All I longed for was a sliver of my mother's affection, a simple sign of approval that, sadly, never materialized. Despite these challenges, I poured my energy into academics, excelling through sheer determination over 12 years of hard work. By 1993, I was studying at Kingston University in South London, relieved to escape my oppressive home life. It was there that I met Emily. Her image is etched vividly in my mind, a beacon of beauty and self-assurance, which sharply contrasted with my shy and introverted nature. Emily, in her final year pursuing a creative writing degree, stood worlds apart from me as I worked on a master's in mechanical engineering and design. Too timid to approach her directly, I watched as Emily effortlessly garnered the attention of confident, outgoing men. At 5 feet 5 inches, with captivating brown eyes and sleek brown hair, she radiated an allure that felt far beyond my reach. Yet, to my surprise, one of her friends started a conversation with me at a party, which eventually brought Emily into my circle. Despite my inexperience with women, my unassuming nature and bashfulness seemed to intrigue her. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I asked her out, and to my amazement, she agreed. Our relationship blossomed, and I'm not ashamed to admit that Emily was the one who took my innocence. But after about 6 months, rumors began circulating about her involvement with other men. Lacking proof, I hesitated to confront her directly, though my doubts grew. Emily, spoiled and coddled by her parents and her sister Julia, often displayed entitled and dramatic behavior, which put a strain on our relationship. Public outbursts became her forte, and while my friends advised me to break things off, I found myself unable to walk away. I was deeply in love, a feeling entirely foreign to me. After graduation, we both secured jobs and moved into a flat in Southampton, New Hampshire, drawn there by Emily's close family ties. Having cut ties with my own family long ago, I didn't object. A year later, we were married, and not long after, we welcomed our first daughter, Grace, into the world, followed by Emma a couple of years later. Emily embraced motherhood with enthusiasm, and for a time, everything seemed perfect. As the years passed, I advanced in my career, eventually securing a position at Walker Engineering about a decade ago. The higher salary and bonuses allowed us to save for a better home, though the economic downturn in 2008 made things tough. Contracts became scarce, job security felt fragile, and working longer hours without extra pay became the norm. It was during this challenging period, with both Grace and Emma in school full-time, that I discovered Emily's affair. She had reconnected with an old acquaintance from university. Immersed in work, I failed to notice the signs until it was too late. Although I initially struggled to pinpoint her lover's identity, Ryan, a former classmate of hers, soon became my prime suspect. When I confronted Emily, she brushed off my concerns with dismissive laughter, leaving me more frustrated than ever. Despite my suspicions, I carried on, largely for the sake of our daughters. My stable income allowed us to purchase a lovely 5-bedroom, detached home in Southampton. Emily, always pushing for a house that reflected what she called our status, pressured me into buying it. Although I had my reservations, the market was favorable, and we secured a decent deal, even if the mortgage was steep. During this time, I made a rare, uncharacteristic decision. I opened a private savings account in my name alone. Into this account, I deposited a portion of my bonuses, just a safety net in case Emily's old flame ever convinced her to leave me. Since I managed all our finances and banking as the family's sole provider, I doubted Emily even knew this account existed. It turned out to be one of the smartest moves I've ever made. Eventually, life seemed to stabilize again. My daughters became my primary focus, and I invested time and effort into supporting their education and interests. Weekends were filled with outings to dance classes, concerts, and trips to the zoo. Meanwhile, Emily was often too preoccupied with her outings, spending hours with her indulgent and equally self-absorbed friends. While other husbands occasionally socialized, I rarely joined them. It seemed most of us were held firmly under our wives' control, albeit to varying degrees. My friends would jokingly hum "Under My Thumb" by the Rolling Stones whenever I canceled plans to accommodate Emily's whims. Even at work, my colleagues would make sly remarks about how much control Emily had over me. Everything finally came to a head a few months ago. Emma, our youngest, had just left for university, leaving Emily and me alone together for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Both Grace and Emma were attending our old alma mater, and while helping Emma settle into her new apartment with her sister, she turned to me with a question that left me stunned. "Dad, why are you still with Mom?" she asked. Emma had always been quiet like me, so this sudden candor caught me off guard. Tears welled up in her eyes as she continued. "I heard she's fooling around with Brandon Walker at your company." Though the news was new to me, it didn't shock me. Over the years, I had chosen not to dig into Emily's infidelities, fearing it would shatter our family and alienate my daughters. I couldn't bear the thought of them, resenting me the way my sisters resented my father. I tolerated her betrayals because I believed it was the price I had to pay to preserve what we had built as a family. Despite everything, I still loved her. Emma's revelation, however, hit me hard. First, it exposed the deep resentment my daughters held toward their mother, something far more intense than I had realized. Second, it stirred memories of my childhood, reminding me how my upbringing had left me vulnerable to such manipulation. Lastly, it revealed that Emily's affair had turned me into the subject of ridicule at work, especially from Brandon Walker, the nephew of the company's owner and the man betraying me. I felt lost. With Emma now aware of her mother's infidelity and my reputation in shambles, I knew I couldn't go on like this. I needed to confront Emily. That evening, as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for her to return, my heart pounded. When she finally walked through the door, her expression was cold and indifferent, as if she were utterly unbothered by my turmoil. She unpacked her bags without so much as a glance in my direction, and I found myself frozen, unable to speak. Eventually, I mustered the courage. "Emily," I began, my voice trembling, "what's going on between you and Brandon?" She looked up, her face betraying no emotion. "I wouldn't call it an affair," she said casually. "It's not that serious." Her dismissive tone left me stunned. I sat there, reeling, as she continued. She acknowledged my role as a provider and even praised me for being a good friend. But then she admitted, without hesitation, that there were certain needs I couldn't fulfill. Her bluntness disarmed me. "Are you saying you've been cheating on me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily shrugged. "It's just my body, not my heart or my mind," she replied, as if that somehow made it less of a betrayal. Her nonchalance left me speechless. She went on to mention her interest in exploring relationships with younger men, tossing the comment out as though she were discussing weekend plans. When I raised my voice in frustration, she shot me a warning look. "Don't shout, Nathan," she said calmly. "Yes, I've been with 2 other men, but you need to accept it. Either you live with it, or I'll leave and be with someone else." I sat there in silence, hoping she'd notice the pain etched across my face. But she continued, trying to justify her actions by claiming that such behavior was common among her friends and even beneficial to marriages. "Beneficial?" I repeated, incredulous. Her attempt to normalize her selfishness felt like a slap in the face. What if I were to explore relationships with other women? I challenged her. Emily laughed, her mocking tone cutting deep. "Oh, please," she sneered. "You? Connect with another woman? Let's be realistic." She smirked as she made her point clear. "This relationship continues on my terms, Nathan. Don't ruin a good thing." And she was right in a twisted way. For 22 years, I had been nothing but loyal, bending to her every whim. Now, everyone knew about her betrayal, and my humiliation was public knowledge among friends, colleagues, and even my own daughters. The next morning, I entered the office and immediately crossed paths with Brandon Walker. His smug expression made my blood boil. With a smirk, he asked, "How's Nathan doing today?" His mocking tone was unbearable, but I said nothing. By the coffee machine, I overheard laughter from a group of men. Their amusement only deepened my shame, knowing I was the butt of their jokes. I walked past the group of men, feeling utterly exposed. Even Vanessa, the boss's secretary, seemed to find my predicament amusing, her sly smirk adding to my humiliation. Once at my desk, I sat down, trying to shake off the rough start to my day. Ridiculed both at home and at work, I struggled to focus, my simmering anger clouding my thoughts. Determined to distract myself, I decided to investigate my father's history. I knew only the barest details, his birthplace and the year he left when I was just a boy, 1977, at the age of 38. Searching through family history sites for connections in Cambridgeshire, I came across several possible matches. Assuming he'd passed away before I reached university, I narrowed it down to 3 potential candidates and posted inquiries on genealogy websites. Lost in thought, I was startled when my boss, Daniel Walker, called me into his office. Daniel, a successful yet morally dubious man, wanted to have a talk. I had contemplated leaving the company several times because of his behavior, but his persuasive nature and the high pay had kept me around. Ironically, I knew about his affair with Vanessa, his secretary, a secret he was keeping from his third wife. Daniel didn't mince words. "I've been hearing some rumors about your wife's activities," he said, his tone casual but sharp. Anger flared, and I retorted by pointing out her involvement with his nephew, Brandon Walker. He simply laughed, acknowledging Brandon's behavior and remarking that it was a family trait to be cads. His words left me speechless. Shifting the conversation to business, Daniel warned me that if my personal issues started affecting work, I might find myself out of a job. It felt more like a teacher scolding a wayward student than a professional discussion. I clenched my teeth, biting back a response, as Vanessa lingered by the door, clearly eavesdropping and likely preparing to spread the latest office gossip. As I turned to leave, I couldn't help but wonder why a young woman like her would involve herself with an older man like Daniel. As I passed by her, the sound of muffled laughter followed me, growing louder as the office door shut behind me. The mockery was undoubtedly at my expense. Lowering my head, I returned to my desk, a wave of uselessness washing over me. Sitting in my chair, I stared at my screensaver, a picture from a family vacation. A pang of regret hit me. Here I was, working tirelessly to support my daughter's education and, unintentionally, financing my wife's infidelities. I'd always been a simple guy, content with my gadgets and modest lifestyle. Most of our expenses went toward Emily's indulgences, her clothes, her trips, her whims, leaving me questioning what I was actually gaining from this life. I clicked on my email and, to my surprise, found a message from Melissa Carter, a representative from the Cambridge Genealogy Committee. Astonished by the quick response, I opened it. Melissa mentioned that she'd come across my inquiry and connected with a woman named Linda Scott, who claimed to be my cousin. Excited by the possibility, I immediately replied with my contact information, hoping to hear from Linda soon. Leaving work brought some relief, but as I arrived home, Emily greeted me with an unsettling smile while she cooked dinner. Her demeanor felt too casual, almost rehearsed. I distanced myself at first, but eventually sat down for the meal. She softly suggested we discuss the previous night. "What's left to discuss?" I asked, my tone cold. "You've already made your stance crystal clear." Emily sighed and attempted to soften her approach. She praised me as a good husband and provider, pleading for me not to deny her anything. Her words rang hollow. I pressed her for an honest explanation about her betrayal and the public humiliation she'd caused me. She shrugged, avoiding eye contact, her response as unsatisfying as ever. Frustration surged as I reflected on everything I'd done to keep her happy, working grueling hours, saving for the house she wanted, sacrificing my own desires for her comfort. I even drove an outdated car so she could have a brand new one. Yet all I received in return was disdain and mockery. Emily finally admitted, in her usual detached manner, that she had needs I couldn't fulfill. Then came the ultimatum. Either I accept her arrangement, or she would leave to pursue a younger man. My anger reached a boiling point. I suppose that includes Brandon Walker? I snapped. Everyone knows what's going on between you two. Her face betrayed no guilt as she confirmed it. Yes, Brandon and I are involved, she said bluntly. But he's more than just a lover. He's your boss and will eventually inherit the company. It's a practical arrangement. Her audacity stunned me. Emily then outlined her twisted justification. Brandon fulfilled her physical needs, and if I refused to comply and accept her terms, she would leave me. She made it clear that in her eyes, the decision was mine, but the outcome would always be on her terms. Emily's words rang in my head as she laid out her future plans with Brandon, who she claimed would provide everything she wanted and needed. As usual, I said nothing, silently rising from my seat and retreating to my study. Tears streamed down my face, and for a moment, I wished I could disappear altogether. The phone rang, breaking the silence, and I answered to hear an unfamiliar voice. It was Linda Scott. We spoke for nearly an hour, and by the time we hung up, the weight of the day had lifted slightly, replaced by a rare, genuine smile. Linda was thrilled that I had chosen to explore my father's past and shared many details about our family. I learned that my mother had forced my father out of the house, lying to me for years. Tragically, he passed away in 1983 when I was just 11, succumbing to alcohol poisoning. Linda explained how her grandmother, my father's mother, blamed my mother for his downward spiral and deteriorating mental health. Linda also revealed that my father had desperately wanted to reconnect with me, but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet that weekend at her home in Cambridge, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt excited. The remainder of the week dragged on. At home, things remained tense and unchanged, and at work, the ridicule intensified. Brandon Walker and his cronies decided it would be hilarious to hang a pair of underwear on my office door with a post-it note inside that read, "Please return to your wife." The cruel prank shattered me. Sitting at my desk, I broke down, unable to contain the tears. I wanted to blame everyone else for my misery, but deep down, I knew my inaction had allowed this situation to fester. I counted down the days to Saturday, desperate for a reprieve. When the weekend finally arrived, I told Emily I was visiting a friend in London. She seemed indifferent, likely relieved I'd be out of her way, making her infidelity even easier to carry out. The drive to Cambridge was stressful, and I arrived at Linda's house an hour later than planned. To my surprise, she welcomed me with a warm hug, the kind of embrace I hadn't experienced in years. She introduced me to her husband, Greg, and their children, Grace and William. We quickly delved into discussions about my father and our shared family history. Linda's warmth and generosity were evident as she and Greg animatedly recounted stories, often finishing each other's sentences. I also met Edward and Laura Price, Linda's brother and sister-in-law, who were just as eager to connect. We bonded over lunch, sharing insights about our father and family, and later went on a short trip that gave me time to reflect. During the return trip, Edward and I discussed our jobs and personal lives. I surprised myself by confiding in my newfound family about my situation with Emily. They listened without judgment and offered heartfelt advice, urging me to prioritize my happiness and stop tolerating the mistreatment. By the time I left Cambridge, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The kindness and honesty of my family reminded me that I deserved better, for myself and for my daughters. Returning home around 8 p.m., I found Emily getting ready to go out. When I inquired about her plans, she casually mentioned meeting up with her friends. Catching her off guard, I brought up her second lover, Eric. She pleaded with me to stop bringing it up, showing little concern for my feelings. "Stop this, Emily," I said firmly. "Just be my wife." She dismissed my plea, insisting that she was my wife and always would be. She asked me not to deny her pleasures, promising to make my life easier. When I asked her not to go, she laughed mockingly. "What are you going to do about it?" she sneered. "You don't have the guts to leave me. You'll always be here." Her words cut deep. Crestfallen, I realized I'd been a fool for far too long, catering to her selfish desires while neglecting my own needs. It was time to end the charade and take action. After she left, likely with Brandon, Eric, or both, I channeled my anger into planning. Searching for a way to sever my emotional ties to her, I located a photo of my mother and sisters, the only one I had. Skeptically, I cut out a picture of Emily's smirking face and pasted it into the family photo. Seeing her face alongside theirs, I felt a strange sense of closure. Placing the altered image on my desk, I finalized my short-term plans. Though executing them would take weeks, I felt ready to follow through. That night, I stayed up researching my options. By Monday morning, I was resolute. At work, I ignored the jeers and arranged a meeting with my bank for 1 p.m. I reviewed my finances and successfully closed my personal savings account, withdrawing the funds. I also removed my name from our joint account, ensuring Emily couldn't access what I'd saved. On my way back to the office, I purchased 2 digital voice recorders, a USB drive, and a new hard drive. Back at work, I accessed the company's private customer files, cracking Daniel Walker's password. Ironically, it was his wife's name and his birth date. I downloaded all essential files, including plans for my energy-efficient hydraulic pump system. After clearing my work PC, swapping out the hard drive, and reinstalling Windows, I spent the rest of the day researching engineering jobs in South London. That evening, after a quiet dinner, I stumbled upon a promising job opening at Sutton Hydraulics, a competitor struggling after the financial downturn. Although the salary was £10,000 less, the role intrigued me. I immediately emailed my CV. The next day, Peter Clark, Sutton's director, called me, surprised at my potential move. While he nearly offered me the job on the spot, I requested an interview, which he scheduled for the following day. Things were falling into place. I also found a flat just 15 minutes from my daughter's and 5 minutes from Sutton's office, arranging a viewing for the day after the interview. Later, I informed Daniel that I needed to visit Kingston to sign some papers for my daughters. He casually agreed, unaware of the changes brewing beneath the surface. My escape was now a matter of time. That night, I called my longtime friend Ethan Clark and arranged to meet him and his wife, Jessica, the following evening after my interview and flat viewing. Ethan and Jessica, aware that something was weighing on me, eagerly awaited my explanation. Before our meeting, I spoke to my daughters about the situation. Their support and understanding reassured me, strengthening my resolve. At the gathering, I disclosed the initial phase of my plans. Their surprise at my decision to finally fight back overshadowed any shock about Emily's infidelity, which they regarded as almost predictable. Jessica, offering me another cup of tea, asked how I came to the decision to leave Emily. I recounted the revelations from my cousins, including how my mother had forced my father out of our home and how my sisters had sided with her. I noted that, unlike then, my daughters were firmly on my side this time. Ethan expressed concern. "Did the meeting with your cousins push you to stand up for yourself?" he asked. I clarified that it wasn't just that. It was my visit to my father's grave that cemented my decision. I noticed something on his gravestone that shocked me, prompting me to take control of my life. Both Ethan and Jessica leaned forward, asking simultaneously, "What did you see?" I explained how the memorial stone bore a rose engraving along with the words, "In loving memory," followed by my father's birth date and his age at passing, exactly the age I was now. Ethan and Jessica recoiled slightly, their expressions showing they understood the gravity of the coincidence. I told them I saw a choice before me: follow the destructive path of my father, as my grandmother believed he had, or fight back and break free. I resolved not to let myself sink any further, not for the sake of maintaining a facade as a perfect husband. Confessing how low I'd felt, I admitted my vulnerability to my friends. Jessica, always practical and tough, offered her support and shared a few ideas to help protect myself and get back at Emily. Her determination made me smile, despite the awkwardness of our earlier suspicions about her own fidelity. I explained my financial strategy, revealing how, in 2008, I'd opened a separate savings account to deposit my bonuses and extra cash. Since I'd secured the mortgage solely under my name, I'd be able to apply for a new one on my own. I also outlined Ethan's role in setting up a new company to transfer ownership of the house through the land registry. Though skeptical, Ethan eventually agreed after I assured him that Emily wouldn't have the means to fight it. I added that her religious parents, if they discovered her infidelity, would prioritize their values over supporting her. Jessica and Ethan even offered to help cover the mortgage temporarily, allowing me to delay payments. On my way home, I stopped at a Land Rover dealership, where I negotiated to trade in Emily's car for the latest model. The dealership terminated the payment plan for her Range Rover Sport, benefiting from the ability to resell it as practically new. I reassured the dealer that I'd return soon to purchase an upgrade for myself, knowing he'd recover any losses by reselling Emily's car. I left with a 2016 brochure, not for me, but for her. When I arrived home, Emily sat in the lounge, sipping coffee and looking pale. I removed my jacket, tossed my bag onto the floor, and prepared to enact the second phase of my plan. Feigning affection, I expressed my love for her and declared my intention to trade in her car for a brand new 2017 model. I showed her the brochure, and she beamed with enthusiasm, exclaiming how much she loved the idea. Completely oblivious to my true intentions, she praised my ability to make her feel better. Her excitement was short-lived when I sarcastically suggested I might use her car to visit my lovers. Her face froze in shock and confusion as I pretended not to notice her reaction. "What's wrong?" I asked. She fumbled for words before brushing it off and asking if I was still upset about our arrangement. I corrected her. "Not our arrangement, Emily. Your arrangement. I never agreed to this." She simply nodded, as if asserting her dominance again. "You'll always stay," she said confidently. "I love you. Don't forget that." I said nothing, walking into the kitchen to collect my thoughts. My phone rang, and I stepped into the back garden to answer it. It was Ethan, confirming that the money had been transferred. Everything was set for the next day. At the bank the following morning, I met with a mortgage specialist and paid off the loan. I closed all remaining accounts and immediately opened a new one at another bank. Content that Emily couldn't drain my funds, I felt a newfound freedom. Later, I contacted the land registry and completed an online application to transfer the deed to Ethan's company. Within 10 minutes, I received confirmation that the process would take 3 to 5 days. That afternoon, I knocked on Daniel Walker's office door. As expected, Vanessa quickly excused herself, leaving us alone. I placed my resignation letter on his desk, ignoring his smug expression. "What's this?" he asked. "It's my resignation," I replied coolly. "I think it's best I leave immediately, considering the situation with our families." His smirk faltered. "We need you here," he stammered, practically begging. "You already have Brandon," I countered. "Good luck with that." Before leaving, I discreetly planted a voice recorder under his chair to capture any incriminating conversations. As I walked out, I threw in one final jab. "When your wife leaves you, don't say I didn't warn you." I spent the rest of the day wrapping up loose ends. That evening, Mark Evans from the dealership kindly drove me home after I dropped off Emily's car. She sat at the kitchen table with puffy red eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked. Reluctantly, she admitted she'd contracted gonorrhea. "I couldn't help it." I laughed and laughed. The tension was unbearable, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I slept soundly that night. The next morning, Emily expressed concern that I found her disgusting. Silent, I simply nodded and left her in tears. The sympathy I felt was fleeting, replaced by the stark realization that I was done. 21 years of marriage, and yet love had faded so quickly. It was over. Completely. I left the room without another word, got into my car, and drove off, feeling oddly content. That night, I stayed with Ethan and Jessica, who were hosting a dinner party with several friends and colleagues. Their warmth and support helped ease my mind, giving me a brief respite from the chaos of my crumbling marriage. When I returned home late Sunday morning, I found Emily up and doing chores. As I walked into the lounge, she rushed over and hugged me tightly. I simply patted her on the back, her affection barely registering with me. Feigning enthusiasm, I suggested arranging for her new car to arrive and offered to drop her off in town so her sister Natalie could drive her to the dealership. The thought of her excitedly driving back in the new Range Rover brought a smile to her face. As she approached me with open arms, I turned to the kettle, pretending not to notice. Throughout the day, Emily displayed excessive affection, attempting to kiss or hug me at every opportunity. It made me uncomfortable, and I repeatedly found excuses to leave the room. By bedtime, I noticed she'd been crying again. Wishing her good night, she asked if I would sleep beside her, craving comfort and reassurances. Feeling nothing, I told her it wouldn't happen until she got the all-clear from the doctor. I firmly added, "You made your bed, Emily." Her bitterness resurfaced. "When I get better, I'm sure I'll find someone willing to share it with me. I've got plenty of lost time to make up for." I chuckled quietly. There it was, the harshness I'd come to expect. Any fleeting regrets from Friday night vanished, replaced by the weight of 21 years of resentment. Once, I might have fallen for her manipulations. This time, I ignored her tears and headed to the spare room. It would be my last night in the house, fittingly spent in the spare room. As I stared at the altered photo of Emily beside my sister's, all I felt was contempt. Emily was only sweet when she wanted something, and nasty when she didn't get it. I woke early. Emily was up as well, preparing for her 8:30 hair appointment. I drove her into town as planned, knowing this might be the last time I ever saw her. I feared it wouldn't be, but I was determined to make it so. After dropping her off, I pulled into a lobby and called the phone company to terminate both our contracts. I paid the penalty fees and was informed the phones would remain active until 5 p.m. Perfect timing. I then headed to the office to collect my P45. The atmosphere in the factory was somber, word of my resignation having spread. My colleagues watched me with a mix of fear and curiosity, unsure of what my departure meant. Passing the coffee machine, I encountered Brandon Walker and his group. Uncertain if Brandon and Eric were aware of their shared involvement with Emily, they greeted me with smug grins, cracking their usual jokes. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. When they asked about Emily, the laughter resumed. Feigning a smile, I replied, "She's not doing well. One of you gave her an unpleasant surprise." Their faces froze in shock, and as I walked away, a commotion erupted behind me. Upstairs, Vanessa offered a half-smile as I approached Daniel's office. Her lowered gaze suggested I'd earned some respect, or maybe just curiosity. Daniel appeared at the door. "I've got what you want," he snapped. "Take it and get out." Entering his office, I retrieved the recorder I'd hidden on Friday and slipped it into my pocket. When Daniel inquired about my future plans, I ignored him at first. Finally, I replied, "Nothing lined up yet." He smirked, clearly assuming I'd come crawling back. When I asked about my final month's pay and bonus, he burst into laughter. Vanessa, delivering my P45, joined in the mockery. Deciding to play along, I laughed with him. "What's funny?" Vanessa asked, her expression wary. "Why do you let the old man take advantage of you every week?" I shot back, laughing harder. Daniel's face turned red with rage, and Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. "You're a scoundrel," Daniel spat, ordering me out of his office. Still chuckling, I gathered my belongings from my office and left the building. At home, I loaded my car with essentials: paperwork, sentimental family photos, and the jewelry and handbags I'd bought Emily over the years. Everything I'd meticulously recorded for insurance purposes would now be sold. I even packed the TV, Blu-ray player, and my movie collection, discarding old clothes to make room. The house felt emptier by the minute. Returning to the bedroom, I noticed Emily's wedding dress in a dusty box on top of the wardrobe. Taking it down, I piled it with her belongings in the garden. Paint thinners from the garage provided the finishing touch. As I struck a match, my phone rang. Emily's voice came through, demanding to know what was going on. Feigning innocence, I asked, "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb," she yelled. "What's this about you selling my car?" Teasingly, I replied, "Oh, I might have forgotten to mention that." Her panic grew, but I remained calm. "If you want a car, Emily, you could buy it yourself." Her screams continued as I hung up. Moments later, the fire blazed, consuming the remnants of our history. I left a torn marriage certificate and a photo of us at Disneyland on the kitchen table before driving off. By 4 p.m., I reached Sutton and set up a new mobile contract. I met with Peter Clark to finalize my start date and greeted Maya, my new secretary, whose professionalism was a refreshing change. Returning to my flat, I ordered pizza and unpacked. Checking my old phone one last time, I noted it was disconnected, leaving Emily phoneless. I smiled, relishing the peace. The next week, I furnished my flat and began diverting customers from Walker Engineering to Sutton. While a few remained loyal to Daniel, most preferred Sutton's offerings. I knew it wouldn't be long before Daniel realized the reason behind his company's decline, but I felt nothing. Indifference had replaced any lingering guilt. With utilities cut off at my former home, Emily would soon realize my absence. When she did, she'd find nothing but empty rooms and silence. My new life had begun. As Emily struggled with her mounting bills, Ethan initiated the sale of my former home, with Jessica's enthusiastic support. By week's end, for sale signs adorned the property. During this time, the AA contacted me, revealing that Emily had moved in with her parents. However, disapproval over her infidelity loomed large in their household. Emily's seething rage toward me, oddly enough, gave me some satisfaction, though I knew the saga wasn't over. By the weekend, Ethan and Jessica hosted another successful dinner party, offering me a moment of respite from my carefully orchestrated escape plan. On Sunday, I received promising news. After just 1 week on the market, the house had 2 serious offers for £550,000. I accepted one immediately, and preparations for the completion began. I made arrangements to ensure Grace and Emma would be provided for, compensated Ethan, and kept a portion of the proceeds in cash to ensure my financial safety. As the week progressed, Ethan informed me that the sale could move swiftly, filling me with relief. I contacted a removal company to clear out the remaining items from the house. Meanwhile, Grace and Emma spoke to their mother, who reacted with increased anger and threats, assuring them the turmoil would soon end. I offered my daughters solace, determined to shield them from the chaos Emily continued to create. On Tuesday morning, while speaking to a new client who had recently met with Daniel Walker about a potential contract renewal, I learned that Walker Engineering was in dire straits. The client revealed that due to significant project losses, the company had been forced to lay off 50% of its staff. Additionally, Daniel's wife, Helen, had filed for divorce upon discovering his infidelity. Despite these revelations, I felt no sympathy. My mind was focused on calculating my commission, which had recently surpassed £30,000. In recognition of my efforts, Sutton's executive surprised me with a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. Though I'd contemplated rewarding myself, this unexpected gesture reinforced my decision to move forward. Staring out of my office window at the sleek new vehicle, I spotted a familiar Ford Focus pulling into the parking lot. It was Emily's. My stomach sank. Anticipating a confrontation, I braced myself as my office phone rang. Maya informed me that a woman claiming to be my wife was waiting in reception. Calmly, I instructed her to tell Emily I was in a meeting and would be down in an hour. 3 hours later, I glanced out the window. She was still there. With a sigh, I decided to leave for the night, prepared to confront her if necessary, or simply drive past if she didn't spot me. Exiting through a side door, I approached my car, only to hear the screech of tires. Before I could react, Emily had blocked me in with her car. Storming out, she was a disheveled mess, wearing what appeared to be her sister's old clothes. Her unkempt hair and wild expression were startling. "You damn idiot!" she screamed, swinging at me, but missing. Fueled by rage, she demanded retribution. Keeping my composure, I invited her to sit in the car. Her anger momentarily gave way to surprise as she noticed the new Land Rover. Once inside, she began pleading for my return, lamenting her financial struggles. "I can't fulfill your needs, Emily," I replied coldly. "Your younger lovers have taken my place." She claimed she wanted to move past everything and even forgave me for ruining her things in her life. My incredulity turned to laughter. Forgiveness? I said, stunned. You cheated, disrespected me, and now you have the nerve to forgive me? I told her there was no chance I'd ever return. Furious, she admitted her friends and their husbands now treated her differently, with the men questioning their wives' fidelity. Despite my brief sympathy, I remained firm, knowing she was only facing the consequences of her actions. Desperate, Emily brought up the house, demanding her share and a divorce. I revealed I'd defaulted on the mortgage and lost the house, admitting I'd lied to her. Her shock was palpable, and I understood her visit's true purpose. Let's keep this simple, I said. I'll give you £30,000 in cash. Take it and go. Her demeanor changed. I'll fight you in court for everything, she snapped. I countered, warning that I'd move my assets around, leaving her with massive legal bills and nothing else. Finally, she relented, agreeing to the money and the divorce. The next day, I filed for divorce, citing infidelity. A week later, we met at Grace and Emma's apartment to finalize the paperwork. Despite the tension, I maintained civility in front of the girls. I handed Emily the cash, and she signed the papers. As I bid farewell to my daughters and wished Emily luck, she burst into tears, likely for the girls' benefit. Emma mentioned the Coldplay concert we'd planned, and Grace smiled knowingly. See you next weekend, Dad, she said. Emily's sobs faded into the background as I left the apartment, her cries echoing faintly behind me. With the doors shut, I felt an unfamiliar but welcome sense of closure. It was time to move forward, no looking back.